We'd like to welcome you to the fourth presentation of the WOW Speaker Series featuring Carl Rogge, the 101-year-old CHS alumni of the graduating class of 1928. Please join me in welcoming Carl Rogge and Dr. Losos. You're introduced.
Someday you'll be up here. Not for me at home. You're all on the way. I often get the question from other people, what happens to you? I know you're out there, but I can't see you, but it's all right. Everybody wants to know how and why. I said, well, my best answer is just keep breathing. Keep breathing, you finally get here, and that's what happened to me. Plus the fact that I've had very fortunate to have a lot of good doctors. I mentioned an estimate the other day. I had something like some 22 or 3 hospital sessions. Some was surgery, some were heart attacks. I had a couple of heart attacks a month ago. On my birthday last year, in October, the 11th, and I was some friends, my relatives there from Connecticut and the West Coast. And I didn't get to attend because I had a heart attack at the St. John's Hospital for another heart attack on my birthday, my 100th, so that's not hard to forget, you know. It can happen and you never know. I'm going to talk to you about all these medical things out there that are unusual. And I don't know that I could have done much to avoid them. I had my first experience with a doctor, and 2 years after I got out of high school, I was out at 28, and I developed a problem in breathing. And so happened to my cousin was a surgeon, and at that time this was in 1930, St. Louis County and Clayton had the first and only hospital that I know of in Brentwood, a couple hundred meters south of Lake Road, a hospital. And the man they had in there was working out, so it just so happened my cousin, who was an ear and throat surgeon, she would stay up at the hospital in the city. At the time on one of the national railroads had their hospital down there across from the city library gone on now. But it chose him to come out and operate the hospital as chief of staff. So he did a combination of the building where they stayed, residents. So he gets me a hold of me and looks at me and puts me in the hospital. And he goes up to work and these are bubbles of fluid that form sacks, like close to the brain. I'm getting a lot of things that you'll probably never have before. Because it blocks out the pressure faster and faster. And so what they do, they have to go up and just cut them off. You're out of sedation. And it'll go overnight. And then, like I said, in fact, we set about 4,000 feet of gauze up there to watch sort of stuff. So that was my first experience. Not a happy one, but unfortunately, it was my cousin. Worse than hell, he did come. And he was successful. But I went on through life and I had to do that 4 times. Not with him. I moved around with my company to different places. As a doctor in Clayton and Central. With performed the same surgery. It took me years to get me over. I was transferred from one time to Springfield, Illinois, on a company office. I had a surgeon there who did it twice. I lost track. I think it was 4 or 5 times. And I came back, transferred back to my company. And this was 2 different doctors, surgeons, St. John's, each one of them. So I've had a choice of 4 doctors, all 4 had no name. And I don't like to think about all my illnesses. That's how I started out. at that age, you know, and learn that, I'll take them into them. That wasn't any fun. And then you could say stop. I had kidney stones about 30 years. Oh, never heard of them before. And I passed them with agony. And I was transferred again by my company. I was with the American Investment Company. I'm digressing here. And their home office is right across the street from Brown's Shoe. I know you all know where that is, because that's where you come into off of Maryland Company in here. And it's those two buildings on your right, just before you make the left into your street company, and there's the American Investment Company that I was with from 1926 to 1864.
When you were the Clayton High School?
Yeah, I got into Clayton in 1924 from a little country school. It was not part of the University City, and it was a two-room schoolhouse. And prior to that, I lived in Columbus, Ohio, in the capital, and got into the 5th grade, big school, and we found I had a lot of talent. I was in the 4th grade orchestra, and I sat on the end of the bench with the person who played the piano, and on my right number I had a triangle. And that was, I made the sound, you know what a triangle is? You don't even see them anymore. Well, that was my talent. I never got back in the orchestra. But anyway, folks came back here, and that's where I landed, in this little town. And from there, when I graduated there, I came here. I was out of the district. And you still have it here now. You'd be surprised to know I took the test for the scholarship, and I missed it by 3/10. I was at 93 something. You did it 90, almost 94. So you had $75 a semester. I know you were more than that. How many thousands?
8,000 a semester.
Keep it time. Did a good job. Keep your education moving. There's another school just west of there called Price Road. Price runs, it's part of the University City. It comes from Olive Street Road south to Ladue. It goes on to Clayton. My uncle lived at that time at Price and Ladue. It's called Town and Country now. When he left there, they put 4 homes into this place on the pool. But anyway, this little country school is so unusual coming from the big city school. When I come back into that 5th grade, and you're on a separate road, and there weren't that many children, there's only about 8 or 9 in a class. And so my life in school was so different. When I came to Clayton High School, I was just amazed. Oh, what you had to do. We didn't have any, we had to study hall at Clayton. And we just all sat in one room, did their lesson, and the teacher would take to the next class. You get to the blackboard, you have arithmetic matches, and these kind of things. And you got to the high school, we sat around for an oblong table, and everybody doing their own homework, and you were amazed what was going on. Somebody was distracting you. At the very end of our study hall was the principal, Burge, and he was enclosed in glass. In front of him was a library, and this I had to digress on for a long time. It was about not quite the width of the room, like we'll say, maybe it was 25, 30 feet wide for the library. And I don't think we had 5, 6, 7 books. So here a few years ago, for Dr. Rogge came here, I went into our library here. I've been coming into the school since 20-some odd years, off on when we moved into this new location. And I go back to the library to see what it was like. And I was so amazed and astounded to see the facility that's observed for handling work there. talked to the librarian, and I saw all these rows of books on the rails. And I said, introduced myself, and that I was in class of 1928, and I described our library to her. I said, tell me, how many books do you have here? She said, I think there are about 25,000 books. I said, 25,000 books? And you have like 800 students or something like that? Well, I showed her what we had at our access. I said, well, tell me about how many books you check out a day, roughly. Oh, maybe 50. And that's out of these 25,000 books. I said, because the rest of it, you were saying that at Taj Mahal is the library could have. It was a marvelous place to get. And everybody said, there's a little table over there. And of course, we had none of those. But just from one world to another, what you all have a journey now. And that you can get so much faster than we never had any idea ever existed back in our days. And we just sat around a table and did our study, and the period was up, and go out and we can move. Another thing I like to give you a lot of credit for is the poor facility you have for your food. You know, well, we had a nice one too. We had a 3-story building, and we had I think 8 drinking fountains, and that was it. If you want to eat, a lot of children there who were home children from the city and town, they would go home for lunch. There was no food, there was nothing, no Coke. Everybody heard us. Water, drink water, you go out and get drink water. In noontime, in the back of the school, there was another building that was built. Our school was built in 1917. It was built by the company, it was owned by my wife's dad, Dr. Strecker. And they said it was in 1917. But prior to that, there was a building I didn't know was still there now in the back, and I give you this picture of this school, the red building. And it was originally a grade school, a brick 2-story. And on the second and third story, in the English side, they had their high school class was something like 12, 15 students. They had a room up there. That was their original facility. And the school was built in 1917. I came in 24, and then back in that same area, there was a little home. A couple ladies lived there, and somehow they opened up the front end, and they made a little lunch place out of the new. And those who didn't have facilities found out, oh, we had a cup of soup or a little ice cream or some little thing like that for 10 cents or whatever. Others would walk up to Clayton too. There was a cafeteria up there on the east side of the courthouse, and not big at all. And you go up there, and sometimes somebody would have a car from driving to school. There were many folks who had cars going coming to school, and we'd run down the Best Cove, which was down at the southwest corner of Washington Unit, the Big Bend there.
How did you get to school?
We got to school well, and yes, where I came from, you had to have those facilities, so there's others in the school, and also, and they came in from Gumbo, the bridge out there. That's where they came to high school right here. You know where the pumpkin town is out there, Halloween, I'm sure you all been out there, that home's across the street. Well, there was a couple of children, at least one child came from there, as I understand. Well, there weren't any buses that brought you in here, so people would make up a car over and take somebody would old enough to drive, and that's how they got in here. And Chesterfield or nothing but farmland. That wasn't anything out there outside of the Naval Service Station. And so that was real country all during the war. One time during the war, they had German prisoners they brought over, and they worked up farmland out there. And the merchandise and the products they got, they took off some would take off to some of the stores locally or in town, Maplewood or Clayton, whatever, and all the way downtown. And if you're familiar with downtown, where the East Bridge is, well, that's where they take their produce. It was called Produce Load. And the East Bridge was there. And the levee, way back before the First World, before the World War, 1940, was nothing but warehouses down there. Nothing, not commercial. There was a restaurant or two, but that levee was loaded, and it goes back to the Civil War days. And there's lots of boat traffic down there. And there were two excursion boats that operated in the afternoon and at night. They had an orchestra on each of them, bars, and they loaded them, and they were very popular. So I started to tell you about the produce, bringing you downtown, and that's where they would take it with the MAC Club. Just we get the East Bridge on that north side, and that's where the produce used to come in. It's still a produce road. I know something about that. My family were in the grocery business, and they were the largest retail grocer nationally. Kroger and AP were big up north. But the independent family between the two brothers, had 8 grocery stores. And this is an amazing story. Downtown, I'm going back now, before I was in high school, in 1820. Well, first of all, I better tell you, I was born in St. Louis, of all places on Lucky Street. And it changed years later to Aldine, and that was like midway St. Louis. I digress here a minute, but and then we moved to when I was about 2 or 3 years old to Toledo, Ohio. My company with my dad. And I remember he'd make calls around the lakes. He'd get a buggy to go out and call on the customers out in the countryside. Mother and I went there a couple of times, about 3 or 4 years ago, and riding the buggy, And then I transferred to Columbus, Ohio, and that's where I got into school. Great, I've been a good school at Columbus, Ohio, state capital, and I got some education there. And
You told me a story once about your father's car and the light.
oh, yeah, okay. Let's go back to the armistice, 1918. Well, the automobiles in those days. First of all, everybody didn't have a garage because everybody didn't have a car. There were more people without cars. And so you had to park someplace, so you parked on the street. Well, they passed the regulation, you had to have a taillight. So you had a taillight, a kerosene taillight. And this is when I'm like 4 years old, I guess, something like. We had a Ford Roadster, it was called. Steeper tube front, top one, running board. And you had a tail light on the back with kerosene in it, coal oil. So at night, Dad and I would walk out to the front of the house and I'd pull the thing down and turn the wick on and the lamp and light a match and light the wick on the thing, and that was our tail light for the night. And then in the morning, you'd go out and turn that off, that was your tail lights. You didn't have any heaters. I know your mother, and this was a common thing you did, if you needed a heater, you had a blanket or something, you put it in the oven in the kitchen, you heat it, take it, or a brick, and put it on the floor, and you got in the car, so there were no heaters in the car. You didn't have anything to do if it rained, no windshield wiper. And they didn't have glass in them necessarily, they had a thing called icing glass curtains to put on, button on the sides of the car to give you protection. There wasn't any seat on Fords on the driver's side or the left side. You had to get in on the passenger side. If you wanted to get in, you had to do it. You go put your leg over it, but that was the way. And you had to crank the car. So those are all the early days of your automobile stuff. the air conditioning and all those things, the luxuries you never even thought about it. That's the way it was, and there weren't too many cars. I brought something on, I don't have it with me, about 1910, you saw a list of things back in those days, of things that were, I forget this, I should have remembered. There's about 100 different things back in 1910, it just so happened, somebody sent me this. And one of the things I remember is something like, only 9% of the homes had a bathtub in them back in 1910. They had tubs or whatever they did, but I don't know. But anyway, getting back to the grocery business real quick here, his brothers, uncles from mine, in 6th Street, if you know where that is downtown, if you're familiar with 6th and Fuller, I guess they're still in business on Washington Avenue and Hollywood, the two busy streets in the city. The streetcars, and there weren't too many buses at that time, but they're just jammed. And people, everybody was working downtown, so this one street, 6th Street, coming over to north to Franklin Avenue, which is the street that runs all the way out west to Wellston. And it's no longer Franklin, it's called Martin Luther King. And at the present time where the Rams football field is, at the southwest corner is Martin Luther King, and 6th Street runs north and south, which I have to show you this way. Because there's this street, the Rams here to the southwest entrance. One block over is Del Mar. Yeah, I think we all know Del Mar comes into Youth City. And then there's a small block, Lucas, then Washington Avenue, which was a big street business where 6th and Fuller was, and the Lowe's Theater, and the MEC was up at the north end, up near the Easy Bridge. So this was a tremendous business section, and that and over another block where Boyd's and Famous are all. So, but getting back to this one section, from Martin Luther King to Washington Avenue, there's 3 blocks. There's one uncle, Dave, had a 3-story brick building right on this corner, facing west. And had an entrance on Martin Luther King and on 6th Street. And the second floor was open in the center, it was a cafeteria, and the music department, and the beauty parlor up there, and was offices back. And the 3rd floor was the warehouse for merchandise, and the bakery to supply this whole store. Then you go passing this store and going on south on 6th Street to Del Mar. On this corner, same side of the street, there's another grocery store, but nothing upstairs but a big size one. He is the son of this man. This is Uncle Dave, this is his son Lynn. At the end of the block, the family had 2 stores on 1 block. And across the street from there, Del Mar, they put in a national bus depot there on just one floor. Also, they put in a building there. They had about 25 different merchants of different kind of food places in Monopoly, from 6th Street all the way to Broadway. That was a big thing. And the other end of that was another grocery store inside this big building. And this was a cousin of this fellow, a cousin of mine. There's the 2 cousins. This was one father, this was another father. And this father's son was here, I'm glad to confuse you on it. But across the street from Lynn's Market was a smaller one on the other side of the street called Thomas. And he is the son of Lynn. So you had Dave up here at 6th and Franklin. Going south to Del Mar, 1 block was his son, Lynn, and Lynn's son Thomas across the street, and coming back and stayed on the other. So they had 4 family stores. I ran one making downtown in 3 blocks. It's unbelievable. It's just, that's what I got into little grocery business. I would, in the summertime, I'd go all the way downtown with my cousin, the girl, who was the secretary to Uncle Dave, had the big store. And I'd work down there on Saturday. I learned how to count. We used to weigh up products, sugar and all these things we know about today. Were prepared, you had to weigh them up yourself. Somebody came in so ahead of time, You weigh on a scale, you weigh pounds of lard. People used lard to cook with in those days. And some butter in tubs, they take it out and you weigh. And eggs, you prepare eggs up ahead. You did all this ahead of time before you had to sell them. You had time to do this. So I got into that to learn how much a pound was, and you looked at the scale. He also had I call it an oven, where they roasted their own coffee in this big oven here. And it was on like a train on tracks, and you roll it up to this oven, and beneath the smells and fumes of this food going all over. But that's how I got started in life. With the rest of the story in the summertime, I'd go downtown and work with my cousin, and I got $1 a day. And then when I graduated late in high school in 1928, it just opened a new store a few months before in the Del Mar Loop. And that's where I went to work. $18 a week, $65 for working a week. There was no regulation in those days. You got down at about 7, it goes up on 6. On Saturdays, you worked till 9 o'clock. And take an hour or so, you never got out of the store till 10. And that was all. There was no vacation. You didn't get an hour. Once you went out, you came back, and that was the way things were. And then when the crash came in 29, and we got out into a class of 28, I didn't do that. I said crash. You know what I'm saying. The stock market, just everything blew up. We're talking about what we're going through now. Fortunately, I was not affected by that because my family was in the grocery business, and they expanded. We had stores down in Bevo Mill. We had the Del Mar store. We had 2 in the Maplewood area. There was 2 stores in Wellston. And Wellston, back in those days, was a fine business market, working man's place now, like it is today. Everybody in St. Charles came over to Wellston to do the shopping different stores. The streetcar would run there and turn around and come back to the Wellston Loop. And my family had the 7 outlying stores and the big store downtown and one in Granite City. And I worked in a lot of them. I never got out to get into too much in sports here because I worked on Saturdays. I'd work in the stores and do things like everybody did. And that's how I learned about retailing. And, so I finally left the stores and talking about my career. Got into insurance. I've gone as far as I go with the family. We had managed a place of buyers, and I was moving. So I got into the insurance field, which was bad days in those days because of the unemployment like we have today. But I had some good connections that I pursued through the grocery business or the wholesale companies we purchased from. So I had some very good contacts and people who could afford things, the executives. And the air conditioning was just coming in, not in stores, but in foodstuffs, where you had frozen foods, you see, taking you back. No one would ever buy a frozen chicken or frozen fish or anything frozen food you couldn't buy that was thrown out. It was bad. And there was no facility for it in the first place to handle. So that was the no-no. Everything was fresh. It was fresh chickens, fresh fish, whatever had to be fresh. That's what you had. Never ever, when you had like the holidays come up and we had a warehouse that provided all this for our stores, we delivered to the store. On a big holiday where they have a lot of merchandise, they take it and they pack it in barrels of ice, 3 pounds of ice chipped up. They take it downtown, the Commission Row, I told you, on Broadway down East Bridge, put it in the warehouses there between the holidays. Thanksgiving, and then they bring them out because they still had merchandise and they had to sell. But it was frozen on city storage up north. Go in there, your trucks would go down and pick it up and bring it out to your stores and thaw it out and put it in the stores and sell it in. You had frozen food, but you thawed it out in the stores in the meat department, and that's how you sold things in those days. There was no such thing as like we know today. You go and reach in a case and get some spaghetti or whatever else. You can butter and ice cream in it. It wasn't there. You wanted ice cream, you had to scoop it out. And it was all hand. It was all handwritten. So because of that, it took more labor. So I said we were running 65 hours a week on employment. That was nationally, a lot of companies. And so that when the finally crash hit, and we get into 34, 35, where they enacted a law that you cut their hours down nationally by law to 48 hours a week, and that's how we get this 48-hour week. Because prior to that, everybody worked whatever your company would ask you to do, you do. That was the story. So that was the beginning of the regulation of hours, and our way of doing that, I forget when this was, on Jefferson and Lafayette or something. We had a building called it's not important, that's where there was a swimming pool in there, and high society always had a big ball during this building in Washington Avenue. But anyway, this particular day was declared a national holiday for all companies in the United States. Closed down your stores. We were out in Wellston, where our office was, and it closed down at noon time. The parade started just near Jefferson or Washington, if you can realize where that is. And that's where we were waiting in line to march all the way down to the Eads Bridge, south on Market. Down to Market Street, down, back down to the Union Station, and out. And that's where we walked. This was, everybody that had any kind of a business, that's where we worked, where we lined up for this parade, I'm trying to tell you. From Jefferson and Washington all the way downtown to Broadway, down Broadway to Market, out Market to 18th Street. But this was just, the whole city was doing it, the whole country was doing this. And this was the celebration of 48-hour weeks. That's how we got it. So for the time was wide open. You worked whatever you come in when there was no regulation. So I remember and I'm family, and I said, you know, you're used to working these hours. What am I going to do with these other times? You felt lost. Well, just go out and play or something, you know. So anyway. It was an interesting and fascinating. So, anybody have any question right now you'd like to ask, or some things that I was throwing out?
We actually can't see anybody, so if someone has a question, you can just throw it out. I can't see. The lights are, but I'm actually seeing anybody raising hands.
I have a question. Who is your favorite president that you've had?
Who was your favorite president?
Well, I like Roosevelt. And I'm pretty much Republican. Well, I voted Democratic in my first days. This was when the crash came. And I remember when the breweries, the beer thing came out, they also had a tavern. Well, I'm trying to get back to your question. Kennedy, I like the Republican. But I was with Democrats early on. I'm still a Republican.
Except that your two favorites were both Democrats.
Not now. I'll put Democrats. Check the one we've got in there now. Big time out loud.
Another question.
Not that I'm biased, but I don't like him.
He's 101.
He's not. And besides that, that's what makes the world go.
Tell them how many staff members they had when you were in school.
Your grandmother told you to talk about how many teachers were at Clayton High School.
I say 19. We had 19 in our staff.
How many were in your graduating class?
I think it was 58. This whole school, we were just approaching 300 students. Yeah. That's where we were.
Do you want to tell them the story about Babe Ruth?
Oh, Babe Ruth, yes. She's heard all my own stories too. Thanks. Well, let's see how that started. Oh, yeah. Cardinals, St. Louis used to have two baseball teams. Cardinals and St. Louis Browns. One time the Browns were better than the Cardinals in the early 20s. And they both used the same, I think, ballpark. One was from town, the other was out. And it was up on North Grand Avenue, up near Natural Bridge. And the Cardinals got to be pretty famous in the 20s. And they had great players like names we may have heard of. The fellows were like Jim Bottomley was our great first baseman, Roger Hornsby, a great second baseman. Frankie Fish was a great second baseman, a guy from New York. Tommy Devino was a player. And anyway, the Cardinals won the World Series. They were playing the World Series here with the Yankees. And I was a sophomore. And I got out to go to the game, and I stayed with a cousin in town. And we were around the ballpark all night long, walking around, and noise and parades and stuff were going on. Babe Ruth, and my cousin, I got a seat. The field was set up out in right field. Had well, there's of course the bleachers out there, but the right field section next to that picture, the grandstand, had a roof on it. And so that was a higher price seat right out in right field. So that's where cousin and I, we got the right field. So we all night long out there walk up and down and noise and stuff. And we had streetcars in those days, no buses. The place was packed, national with the roof. And the doors opened at 8 o'clock. And the game started at noon. And between the innings, sometimes you'd fall, go to sleep, up all night long. But that's how I brag about seeing Babe Ruth at the Cardinals World Series, and we won that in 1926. And we had some great players that time. Getting back to sports, let's go back to Layton High School here. You have a right to be proud of she knows all about these because I've been submitting these special people that are being voted in.
Hall of Fame?
Yeah. I submitted a couple to the Hall of Fame. I guess you all are familiar with it. Let me try and describe it, and I can't. But anyway, Clayton High School was from a country school on Price Road. He had sisters in my class. He had an older brother. I didn't know him. And there was another boy. This fellow's name was Jablonski. And the other fellow's name was Bill Beckman. Beckman's folks had a feed store on Mile Street and Price. They were both great athletes. Jablonski, 2 years ahead of me, lineman, and great student besides. And I came out to water football and playing against him and took care of me real fast. But I couldn't stay because I had to get back into the stores on Saturday and do those things. But anyway, he had a great student, president of his class, went on to Washington University, did the same things at WashU, thanks, and played football, captain at WashU. This is when they had good teams way back in the late 20s. At Washington U. Got a lot of publicity. And when he finished there, he gets an appointment to West Point. He played 3 years at West Point as a lineman, stayed on as assistant coach. The war broke out. He moved on up into infantry school and went through the whole thing. And there are a couple stories I heard from his sister. His sister was in my class. That's why I knew so much about. His name was Harvey. We called him Jabbo. Even that name had by our coach who had the department where I used to use your plain tie and everything else and make things downstairs at school. But Jabbo, that's where he picked that up all through his life. And the sister told me a story at our reunion, at our barbecues, and your homecoming days that we used to have before it was as elaborate as it is today. We graduates would have a little picnic up at the top of the park, and then the parade would be over, and the game would start, and we'd go down and watch the game. Out there used to be our own little clan one now this party you all put on now is like an unbelievable party of guys that you had there last year. It's like a show out of New York putting on. But anyway, That's right. This is one sister, and she told me one time that he was, Jablonski, Jabo, was elected to a collegiate Hall of Fame, football player or athletes. And Jablonski was the only one from a college who had ever captained 2 university teams. That he captained Washington University and West Point as well. So he was just full of the things that he had done. Tremendous athlete and individual. Went all through the war. She also told me a story. He moved on big time in the military. And when it was over, and the Shah of Iran was into power at this time. And he went over from one department, military department, I got him to advise him. And he was there with him for quite some time. And he had an order to get, they wanted to get back to Paris rapidly. So he did it rapidly, means midnight now, and couldn't move his belongings much. So the Shah said he'd take care of it for him, go ahead, you know, as if he would go. And he arrived in Paris, and in time he found out what he was missing, if anything. There was a Persian rug, and they're not Persians. There's a difference in Persians and Chinese, right? The Chinese are not the real Persian rugs. And I say that because my family happened to have some Persian rugs. There's a difference, who knows. But they were the original. But anyway, he finds out one of these Persian rugs is missing in his inventory, and he contacts, this is his daughter, telling me this, his sister. Contacts the Shah, says, you know how to handle this? And the Shah said, don't worry. That's the only one that's made. I had that made for you. We'll find it. When they found it, you can imagine what happened to whoever had that rug. True story.
Well, it's 4.
Is it?
So let's wrap it up in 1 second. Carl is 101. He still drives. You might have seen his light blue car. He comes about once a month. Until recently, he was still doing Meals on Wheels. Do you want to tell any last stories?
Yeah. I hope you all have some power. I've had a notice from my doctor turned me into the police for checking to see if I could continue to drive the rest of my life. That was a shock. I got this 10 days ago. And so that's what happened to me. I have a letter from the state. And I told them that they wanted me to be doing something now. I told them about this assignment that I was going to be with you all here for an extension. And they gave me an extension for another 10 days. I'm supposed to go in to take my physical for drivers. I've already had a test on my eyes, but I had a doctor. I needed glasses anyway, again. And so I've got restrictions. Even if I have to pass, I must wear glasses driving. I can't drive over 45 miles an hour and no driving at night. Well, I don't do any of those things now for years. One other thing I tell you that I'm proud of. For the last 28 years, every Wednesday, God willing, I deliver Meals on Wheels out of St. Luke's Hospital. And if you know what that is, the hospital prepares the meals and volunteers come and pick them up. And through contacts they have, people come and ask for help. And then we volunteers deliver meals at no expense to anybody. It's strictly a volunteer gas on our time. And every Wednesday I've been doing this for people who can't get out to get it. And then they pay, so they pay the driver on Friday, collects the money. It's $3.25 I buy lunch. And you get a bag that has milk in it and bread and maybe cookies and a container that's meat and some kind usually, and then a couple of vegetables and whatever it might be. It's all packaged and so you go to the house and you deliver and you have a pack of food to take to. They have to have a container on the porch. You can't leave it outside because of the weather, one thing or another. If they don't have it, you don't leave it. And I've got a couple of them I found this very recently. I came to her home. Her husband died recently, and short story. I found out from another relative called me. She fell twice. They called me the other day again. And they couldn't get her. This little lady, she's at the rather a new facility right off of, let's see what, Merrimack River area. And this used to be Union Electric's club for their employees 40 years ago. It's been torn down. It's a tremendous facility there, if you know what I'm talking about. It's probably the most expensive. This woman is telling me about her there, $8,000 a year, a month. $8,000 a month in this home. $100,000 a year. You know, how many people can do that? But they have her. She's in there. And she lived on Kersville Road. She and her husband, the husband who died, but when I met him, he was so old. There used to be a real dairy on Clayton Road in Kersville where they had cows, and he used to milk the cows. And it tied into that story here some 10, 12 years ago. Jonathan and I belonged to St. Clare's Catholic Church. And a priest some 10, 15 years ago had been a priest for 10 years. So we heard about it, so we said, well, we'll give him some money to get. We gave him a bench. And I found it back in those days for a girl who was in Salem, is this family's daughter. It all comes out when I started delivering meals to the mother and dad that she was a girl who sewed these things. Her dad delivered these benches over there. So these guys, I had another letter the other day from someone who's on meals, and it kind of makes you feel kind of good. Signed by everybody. There's 18 volunteers in St. Louis. Because my driving mean whatever it's going to be. They want me to call me, they go and pick me up and bring me over there to be with them on the days that I'm Wednesday, just to get me a place where I can come and see them, which is really nice. It was a great, they had a big Christmas party every year. That was my last day that delivering me as a St. Louis hospital. But it's a great thing, and they have them all around the county. And they only always the finest meals, but there's a lot of nourishment.
Why don't we thank Carl? And I'm sure if you want to come up and ask him questions, he'll be happy to answer anything.